just joining, really, my name is Anthony Taylor, or maybe I didn't mention that. I'm the CEO of SME Strategy, founder of SME Strategy. I've been facilitating strategy sessions for the past, 14 years, organization big and small, from small nonprofits, national nonprofits, $1 million startups, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 executive teams, and just love getting to do strategy work and helping teams move forward. And it's been really neat, over the past, time, helping create this strategic planning and building the methodology for alignment so that it was effective. And one of the things that I learned as I've just been like reading about management is just the amount of work that's required to move a strategic plan and an organization forward. And so there's a lot of components to it. It's not just doing a bunch of stuff as part of your strategic plan, but rather, creating the right environment for change, making sure that your people are supported. HBR did a study about a decade ago saying, what really moves strategy forward is communication and decision rights. And so there's so much management science around successful strategy implementation, but it's a little bit unknown as to what are those, successful ingredients. And so today, just really want to be able to share those ingredients that we found through our research, through our practical work. We've led, I think 30 companies through our strategy implementation program, with really great results. And so excited to share that with you today. So let's get into the meat of today. What is strategy implementation? So the strategy implementation from our side of things is the process of turning a strategic plan into actions and outcomes. So let's say your team took, 2 or 3 days off site, or several weeks or months in person. You created this great document with a vision, mission, strategic priorities, goals, and actions. And you said, this is where we're going. That's it, right? You have a document and then it just happens. No, obviously. It requires the day in, month in, week in work to support moving that forward, having the conversations forward, and getting the work done. And the number one problem I've seen with teams is the idea of like the tyranny of the urgent. The fact that there's so many operational things that are challenges, that making that strategic time is such a challenge, to work on the business versus in the business. And so 90% of companies have a strategy, but fail to execute it. And the key word there is operationalize it. How do you take your strategy work and build it into your operations? One of the questions that I'll have you think about and reflect on is how much time is my team investing in strategy implementation? How much time are we investing? Like, what is our strategy budget for time? And in my experience, and I was trying to figure this out, like I've literally done hundreds of strategic plans. I'm doing 5 plans in 1 month. Most strategic plans aren't expensive, in the sense that it doesn't cost a lot of money to put many of the initiatives that need to be put in place. The biggest cost investment is time and focus and saying no. And so as you think about this by the way, if anybody wants to drop their title in the chat, I would love to see that, just so I know a little bit more about who I'm talking to and what your needs are. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them through, so I'll be able to answer them throughout. But the biggest challenge is getting teams to focus and work on their strategic plan versus in the business, and then figuring out where that balance between the two truly is. So before I get into the depth of it, I do want to look at the process holistically, because I know we're focused on this strategy implementation side, but if you think of the idea of like solving problems upstream, I want to highlight the entire process so that you and we can think about how strategy issues arise. So the first stage that we have here is stakeholder engagement. And that's making sure that everybody in your strategic plan is understanding what you're doing, that you've pulled from them what their needs and challenges are, and then you're incorporating it into your planning. So from a strategy implementation lens, some issues that can arise by not doing this properly is stakeholders resist for whatever reason, or you're not doing the things that they think you should do. So you might be doing the right things and they're resisting because you're not communicating enough, or you're not doing the right things and you're still not communicating enough. So one of the considerations is to say, hey, did we on the front end? And are we on the back end engaging with our stakeholders sufficiently to support our ultimate strategy implementation, not just creating the strategic plan document? So do you see the same perspectives? Do they understand the same challenges? Do you have the same priorities? And have you informed them why you're making the decisions that you're making, so that they understand the plan and they're pulled into it versus it being pushed on them? Large process changes, large system changes often happen to stakeholders, but not necessarily with their input. And so getting them bought in is definitely a prerequisite. Second piece is the strategic planning and the alignment. So successful strategy implementation assumes that you have a good strategic plan and that it's aligned. So both aligned within your leadership team, aligned within your organization, and aligned with your strategic priorities. So did you align on a current state? Do you have a clear vision and mission? If those of you on the webinar are listening and you're reading your mission and vision and you have no idea what it means, it's probably going to be impossible to implement your strategic plan because you don't know what success looks like. So it might be worth going back to the drawing board to clarify, to distill, to more holistically align on your vision and mission. Because if you don't know where you're going, how will you ever get there? And so strategy implementation is moot until you have a good where are you going. If you don't have clear and aligned risks, if everybody doesn't understand the biggest challenges, the biggest needs, the biggest gaps, then you will prioritize differently as it comes down to implementation. And so asking your team, hey, what are the biggest things that are going to get in the way? And do we see things the same way? I might have potential risks over here as marketing. You might have potential risks over here as sales. You might have potential risks as a CEO. You might have potential risks as HR. And if we aren't aligned on our risks, we're going to prioritize our projects and we're going to prioritize activities differently. And it's going to create misalignment. Next stage of prioritization to support implementation is, are we clear on our organizational priorities? Like as a team, what are our priorities? And then are we clear about how we're going to measure it? Most organizations that I see that come to us with a strategic plan, they have objectives and not goals. I'm not going to talk too much about it. The difference between objectives is that they're qualitative and the goals are quantitative. And I kind of say like, hey, if one of us is aiming to increase revenue by 10 million and the other one is aiming to increase it by 5 million, we're aiming at different things. If customer satisfaction for you is 60% and for me it's 80%, we're aiming at different things. If you want to have 10 processes completed and I want to have 3 processes completed, we're aiming at different things. And so that like scope of goals is critical. And so that all comes from the strategic plan, but you don't feel it until implementation. And so really check your strategy and your strategic plan for that alignment, for that clarity, for that specificity before you even try to implement it. Otherwise, you're going to get challenges down the road. And then the last piece around how do we implement it? Action planning is kind of table stakes. Most people know how to do that. But where I see challenges that they face is within the communication planning. Like, what is the process for staying on top of our strategic plan and articulating it and getting folks bought in? And then as you see here where it says critical capacities is not just the plan, but the environment around the plan. And that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time today in our 6 critical capacities for strategy implementation, so that you as a viewer, as a participant, can have these conversations with your team and try to build up your strength in each of these areas. As we think of strategy implementation, we break it down into 3 pillars. There's the strategic critical thinking. Are people thinking with the right priorities in mind? Are they understanding how to say yes and how to say no to things? Leadership, which is some of the softer stuff. There's the skills to get people to buy in, have other folks follow you. There's, tons and tons and tons of books around leadership, and we're not going to focus on how to become a better leader per se. But when we talk about systems and structures, that will support your leadership and your ability to drive change forward. So change management is one of the biggest topics that we see people concerned with, especially as external trends and forces are happening. Your ability to respond to change is critical and necessary. The last piece, and arguably the least sexy, It's operations, systems, and processes. And as we've grown our business, as I've become smarter, wiser, older, I found that the operations, systems, processes, the not sexy stuff is the stuff that makes the biggest difference. And so I really want to encourage and invite everybody to reflect on how can we put better management systems in place to support continuous improvement. So instead of like a big up and down, how do we make like measured change over time that lasts and is sustainable? If you have any questions about that, please feel free to drop it in the chat. So at a high level, 6 critical capacities. So in the previous graphic, you saw them as a wheel. I'm going to go through them left to right, and then I'm going to fire hose an amount of information for you to look at what are the topics that we need to cover inside our strategic plan, our strategic plan implementation. And then what are some of the questions that you want to ask? If you see this and you think it resonates, like I said, check out our course. It walks you through the majority of the topics that we're going to cover, and certainly each of these critical capacities. So from left to right, alignment. Alignment is the key for strategic plan success. It means that everybody is on the same page. Everybody knows what's going on. We're moving from implied to explicit, and we're staying aligned. My colleague Jen, who's not here today, she thinks about it akin to going to a chiropractor. If you've ever been to a chiropractor, they adjust your spine or whatever, you get in alignment, and then it comes out of alignment. Teams can be super aligned coming out of a 2-day or 3-day strategy session. And it takes one conversation, one email, one, whatever to move out of alignment. And 1,100 days, 3 years of strategic planning is a lot. And so what are the things that you can do to support your team's alignment and making sure that we're staying on top of our plan? So that's like reinforcing the vision, reinforcing the mission, reinforcing the strategic priorities, asking, moving through unknowns. Those big existential questions is a big thing that I see that holds teams back, answering those, getting to the bottom of it. Doing what you can do to keep your team aligned from wherever you sit. If you're a CEO, it's critical. If you're a middle manager, it's critical. If you're a senior leader, it's critical. Responsibilities and accountability. So moving on to the next one, excuse me, is who is doing what in your organization? One of the challenges that I see is that as your organization grows, evolves, changes, and the scope of your work grows and evolves and changes, so too do the roles and responsibilities within your team. And the issue is that most teams don't take time to formally rescope people's jobs, formally rescope people's responsibilities. There's the implied stuff and there's the explicit stuff. And then there's the stuff that happens within the plan. So you might have a really, really great strategic plan, but if it doesn't have responsibilities and accountabilities assigned to it, who does it? Where does the buck stop as it relates to one of your strategic priorities? Where does the buck stop in terms of reporting the goals or reporting challenges or things like that? And so there are these like systems gaps that fall apart. Another place where systems gaps fall apart is decision making, as I alluded to earlier, is who has the final call on this? Who owns this meeting? Who owns the decision if we're going to invest in here? Who, decides where we're going to spend our money there or somewhere else? You might think that it falls to the CEO or executive director, and it might be obvious, like the head of a committee or the head of a department, but there's a lot more unknowns than knowns in that case. And then if it's implied, somebody will assume someone else will do it. And there's a joke poem around the story of somebody, everybody, anybody, and nobody, which we've talked about before. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. But the ability to pass the buck unintentionally is huge in companies. And so making sure that it's explicit and using a tool to do that will help you. Third, communication. How are you structuring the flow of information up, down, and across in your organization? How are you staying on top of important decisions? How are you making sure that there's transparency with the decisions that you're making? How are people to be informed of their responsibilities and accountabilities? One big gap that I see with teams is celebrating success. They take it for granted that everybody has a view inside the organization, or as a executive, you might not see what your fellow executives are doing, but if you don't take the time to communicate it, gaps end up happening and everyone assumes nothing is happening. And so how can you structure communication up, down, and across, both to pull people into your strategic plan, but also celebrate successes that happen within your organization? Monitoring, tracking, and reporting, another critical capacity. That's really making sure that we have a performance-minded organization, so that we're making progress, not just being busy. And so there's the monitoring or governance of the plan, the tracking, and then the reporting out. Reporting out could be within the executive team, it could be within sub-teams, it could be within the entire organization, but fundamentally keeping score for your strategic plan. A metaphor that I like to use is, if anybody here plays sports or has played sports, the games you play for fun versus when you play to win, the competitiveness when you play to win most often comes out. And so by tracking and monitoring or telling people clearly and explicitly what the goals are, you allow people winning. As a minor segue, when we created SME Strategy, it was really to change the world. It's because I believe that if you like your job and your employees like their job, they're going to come home happy. If they come home happy, that means that your household is happy and your community is happy and your neighborhood is happy. And so if you like your job and you have a good strategic plan, then that's our way of changing the world. And so by putting all of these things in place, it's just to support your people's success and happiness, including your own, of course. So values, behavior, and culture. So if you've ever heard of the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast, which you talk a lot about here, how we do work in our organization is as critical as the work that we do. And if monitoring and tracking is keeping score, values, behavior, and culture are the rules of the game. When you come to work, there's certain folks that you work better or worse with. And often it comes down to values alignment or misalignment. Not necessarily who they are, but how they do what they do and how they think about it. And you know that there's folks that you really hate working with, and there's probably a values misalignment. And so being able to use this as a formalized structure in your organization so that folks coming in can be successful and that you have a system for filtering folks that don't work. I've been reading and talking to people about their hiring processes are getting longer and longer. And as I was thinking about it, it's a conjunction of, it's more and more important to get the right employee. Employees have arguably more power than potentially before. But also with the increase of remote work, you need to make sure that you have an employee who's going to fit within your culture and can do the skills. Because if they were with you every day by your side for 3, 6, 9, 12 months, you would be able to see very quickly if they fit or didn't fit, or they would figure out if they fit or didn't fit. But it's a lot easier to kind of hide below, which doesn't help either the employee or the employer. And so by getting that values, behavior, and culture fit early on is critical for successfully actually moving your organization forward. The last piece is leadership and change management. And that's really driving forward those key pieces of work, driving forward those key initiatives, driving forward, the culture and the people aspect and the new future that you want for your organization. Most visions that we see isn't just a subtle trajectory. Rather, it's a phase change. And phase change don't happen just by accident. They happen because they are driven. And so as a leader and as working with other leaders, how are you putting systems in place to get people to buy into this new future? And how do they see the change as one as being positive that they want to be a part of versus negative that's happening to them? The better you can be at getting people to be part of your changes, the more successful you're going to be as a leader, the more successful you're going to be as a manager, and the more successful your strategic plan implementation is going to be. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, I see that we got a question popping up in the chat. I will review that in a second. So I'm now going to, this is conceptually what you need to work on from a critical capacity standpoint. The next slide is going to be the individual tools that you can institute within your organization in each of these areas. It's going to be a lot of text. I haven't figured out a way to do it better. Please feel free to screen capture if you'd like. These are the workshops that we do in our implementation course. These are the workshops that we do when we lead teams through implementation. There's, I think, good ways of doing it and bad ways of doing it. I can't impact if you do it well or not, other than you taking our course. But I can tell you that there is a tool that you can use for this. Okay, you ready? Boom. I'm going to give you a minute just to read it because you won't listen to me and read at the same time. Dylan asked the question, if have you found doing culture work before and during strategy is helpful? I've seen the need to build team trust and cohesion to help better strategy. The way we approach strategic planning sites and our structure for it is designed with building trust as part of it. We don't do the like team building stuff, but we do find that through the process, team building happens. Team building happens in the formal settings through conversations like this, and informal through like dinners and spending more time and just like getting to know the person and asking more about them. And then throughout all of our workshops, through strategy implementation, it really is the glue. So when we talk about, I'll jump ahead just Dylan, because you asked the question. One of the workshops that we have with one of our colleagues is strengths-based leadership using the Clifton Strengths Finder. And so, by understanding your colleagues more, what their natural tendencies or proclivities are, you will have greater trust with them and they will have greater trust with you because you understand them. So a lot of this kind of strategy work to be successful is moving things from unknown to known or assumed to explicit. And so that's why we want everything on paper. And so all of the things that you see here are taking ideas, concepts that rattle around in people's brains and putting them on paper so that they are then referenceable. So that's why I like the processes, systems I'm so big on, because it just helps teams just get out of that like conceptual, or that they have all of these things rattling on their brain and we can say, hey, here's what we agreed to, here's what we wrote down. Okay, so process for the rest of the webinar. I'm going to go through each of these sections. I'm not going to tell you how to do them. Then we're going to do Q&A, and that'll be that. Okay, great. So alignment. Two tools that you can use to support alignment is a regular meeting or communication cadence. And so I said, when you were registering for the webinar, like, how do you do that? So what we recommend is a monthly project call to talk about what you're doing in your strategic plan, the tasks, a quarterly strategy review to review the performance of your plan. So that goes back to the monitoring, tracking, and reporting, as well as a yearly strategy session offsite. So really, and then of course, whatever operational meetings you might have weekly or quarterly, you might have operational meetings like for the sub departments or divisions, and you might have them one-on-one, but really making sure that the amount of communication and structure supports your team alignment. Another tool that you can use is a team charter. It's often found within like a project charter, but a team charter helps new teams or teams that are going through their kind of forming, storming, norming, in understanding their expectations. Like, don't email me, call me. Or if we have to talk about this, make sure that we're meeting in person. Or here's how I like to work, and here's why we exist. Just making sure everybody's on the same page is how I think about alignment. So anything that your team is not on the same page of will create gaps in your implementation down the road. Next, responsibilities and accountabilities. So developing clarity between roles and responsibilities. So that could be within a project, that could be within a team, that could be within, your core strategic plan. So something like a RACI or RASCI matrix could be helpful. Talks about, who's responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed, so that everybody understands what role they play and where does the buck stop. High level, I recommend one person responsible for one thing, not a group, not a committee, not a team, not a pair. It's one person, because that one person will then understand that responsibility sits on their shoulders, and it'll support clarity with everybody else on the team knowing, who's doing what. Goal and action tracker. This is helpful because when there's sub projects or sub tasks, then you can say, okay, Jim, you said you were going to do the updates to the website, or Sharon, you were going to update the stakeholder register. by making sure that there's a person responsible, you have a greater line of sight, but it also supports those people in their own ownership of it. It's not like, oh, maybe that person will do it, or maybe we'll do half. It's 100% or nothing. And I find it's a really empowering tool to help people be successful. So don't think about it as, hey, I'm putting stuff on people. I'm actually giving people the tools they need to be successful. Communication. So communication mapping, it is my favorite workshop that we do at SME Strategy. It looks at all of the communication flows. So if you think of like a highway where trucks or cars travel, think about that from communication. What are the flows of information throughout your individuals, throughout your teams? And are they getting the information they need when they need it, both in terms of quantity, but also quality? So we see a lot of people that have meetings, but bad meetings because they don't have agendas. Well, that's a communication structure. So there we go. How to lead effective meetings is a training that we do so that you can make sure that you have the right agenda, support your right outcomes, you're not wasting time or not doing duplicate work. And then cascading your plan. And this is a big gap because, you have the strategic plan that was created likely at the executive level or at the board level, and then you need to get it into the hands of people. So how do they recognize where their authority is? How do they recognize what steps they need to take? And making sure that there's a clear and specific plan in terms of both how to roll it out, but also how they can contribute. Do they need high-level details? Do they need specifics? Do they have components as part of it? Is this an FYI or is there actions required? So putting a structure behind that is critical. Monitoring, tracking, and reporting. So we've talked about the goal and action tracker, but really building one from a performance, like a scoreboard. We have one of those as a template. Monthly project calls will support, hey, did you do the things that you needed to do? One of our clients is behind on their actions, but they are rocking it with their accountability. And so I'd rather see somebody be consistent than somebody that does a lot of performance and then falls off a cliff. Is building that muscle, building that consistency, building it into the organization is critical. And then quarterly strategy reviews, making sure that you're not just saying, oh yeah, everything is feeling good. Yeah, we're doing great. Oh yeah, sounds good. To, yep, we wanted the number to be 100 and we're halfway there. Or we wanted to do 7 of these and we're 3 down the road. Or we've cut down our reporting time from 60 days to 30 days. And I rattling off examples, but these are all specific goals that people have shared, that it's incredible when you see someone who's like, I want my reporting time, instead of it being 2 months, I want it to be 1 month. And then I want us to have a meeting within 7 days. How that precision and specificity like drives an organization forward. It's freaking cool. And I want that for you. So I invite you to be as specific as possible with your goals, and just don't half-ass it. Values and culture. So mapping behaviors. This is a good one to say, like, hey, we have our value statement, but what does that actually mean? Like, I know that we say integrity, but like, what does integrity really mean? What does being a team player really look like? And how do I know that I'm living it versus not living it? So really making it explicit so people know how to be successful. I talked about the strengths-based leadership so that you understand that, like, having a diverse team, and I'll say diverse as in non-homogeneous, is valuable, but sometimes it can be very frustrating because other people have tendencies that aren't necessarily like your own, and it has brought them to a point of success. But for you see it as challenging because it doesn't exactly align. So how do you take those differences and make them strengths versus frustration? And leading a bunch of different teams, being on different boards, it's something to work through. If you want to be a successful leader, is how do you utilize the skills on your team, recognizing that diversity truly is a strength. Yeah. EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, and unconscious bias. It's something that I'm learning, and that we are including it in our workshop so teams can more holistically and more completely understand how unconscious bias might impact their decision making. And so I can't change anyone's decision making, not that I would want to, but I can highlight things they might not see. So as facilitators, our job is to call out blind spots. And so if you consider that you might have a blind spot in terms of biases, almost all of us do, it's a good conversation to have with your team to say, hey, how might this impact our hiring? How might this impact our processes? How might this impact how we do business? And then choose, hey, is that Do we want to keep doing it that way? So again, supporting the behaviors and the culture that you want of your organization is the point of that, because that's what's going to drive forward the future of your business or organization. And the last critical capacity, leadership and change management. So this is really around preparing and leading change. And so one of the workshops that we have is both preparing for change so that everybody understands this, that there are steps to change management, but then also taking a specific change initiative and leading it through the 5 Ps, as we call it, and then picking one of the, like, either ADKAR, Prosky change models. So a new change could be, we are changing the coffee from medium to dark, and that is a change process. Or we're going to move from this IT system to that IT system, or we are moving offices from here to there, or we are integrating 2 or 3 businesses, which I have seen. And so all of those are change management processes, big or small, that I encourage you to put a system behind, so you are proactive and responsive versus reactive and putting fires out. And some of these changes, so let's take the one that's maybe more palpable, is buying and integrating a business. Some of these transactions can be 10 to 100 million transactions. And so if you're spending $100 million on a business, what are you investing to make sure that that integration goes well? Most people say nothing, which is crazy. And so, like, why wouldn't you invest on the back end to ensure the success of your investment? If you're going to spend $100,000 on a software solution, how much are you investing in training or communication or people support so that they get the gains faster? The last piece around leadership and change management in terms of a workshop, and there's many, many more, is supporting prioritization. A players, highly effective people, they want to get stuff done. And if you've got an executive team of 7 to 10 to 15 people, everybody has different stuff that they want done. And some of these are cross-sectional priorities. And so how do you, as an executive team or a team, decide on what is a priority and what is not a priority? What must you do? What could you do? What should you do? And what won't you do? Moscow. And so having those conversations as a team will support you moving it from implied to explicit. It'll help you focus all of your resources in the right place. And then ultimately, it'll help you get the stuff that you need done. And so, like, as a summary, all of these capacities are what we, as SME Strategy, encourage you to foster. And then the how is by having these workshops, conversations, structures within your team to support the ongoing and continuous attainment of the capacity. These are not set it and forget it kind of things, but if you set it, it should be good for a little while until you outgrow it. So all of these tools are going to have expiry dates on them that you should then say, great, do we need to kind of renew this, or do we need to change it? And so as you grow, as you evolve, putting the systems in place, but having them as living documents is key. And as I mentioned in our new training, we'll walk you through how to do all of those things so you aren't just left on your own. Leonard asked, what is Moscow? And I highlighted it's a tool to support prioritization, which stands for must, should, could, and won't do. And so we walk through that in one of our workshop modules. You can also Google it. And then Aki says, we're struggling to get teams to regular update progress on annual plans they have developed to implement the strategy. Any insights on addressing this? Yes. My question would be, how regularly are you updating it? Are they clear on what they're updating? Are they clear on why they're updating it? Do you have a specific template that they can update? And is the purpose of the update to inform, to discuss, or to make decisions? And if you're unclear about what the purpose of the update is, then they are unclear of what the purpose of the update is, and it will smush everything together. So that applies for most meetings. Is the meeting informational? Is it discussional? Is it decisional? And if we're unclear of what they are, you are under optimizing your meetings and your communication as a team. So 6 critical capacities, how you do them from a project perspective. And then if you want to learn more, you can check out our resources. Now I want to get into some Q&A for you, and I'm actually curious what you took away from this. I'm happy to go back to that slide. Before I do that, I just want to highlight that as SME Strategy, as a strategy implementation company and strategy creation company, we have some support. You can work with us live, whether that's virtual or in person. We do some sessions like stakeholder engagement sessions we'll do in virtually, whereas the work we'll do in person. So if you want to work with us, go to smestrategy.net. You can learn more about the work we do. For free support, we have our podcast, the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. We have our YouTube, we have our blog, and then we have our Strategy and Leadership Community, which I will drop the chat in there and send in a follow-up email. And then, as I mentioned, our online course on strategy implementation. If you go to courses.smestrategy.net, after April 21st, this is going to be the price. If you order before April 21st, you'll save $300, and you'll also get $2,000 in free bonuses. Those free bonuses look like access to our alignment course, which is $500 on its own, and then 3 group calls to support your strategy implementation. So bringing questions like the ones that have been posted in the chat today, and then answer them live in discussion so that you can move those implemented. Plus, you'll get bonuses like our Project Management 101, our effective meetings training. So we'll give you the templates to lead your own strategy, monthly, quarterly reviews, as well as a template for just all meetings that you can use. Ultimately, it's workbooks and guides to support your strategy process. So you should be able to take everything we have, like dump it into your organization, and you should instantly see like huge ROI in terms of effectiveness. The question that someone's asked is, hey, how long do I have access? You have lifetime access. And I encourage you to implement the course over a year. If you focus for 6 to 9 to 12 months on improving these systems, you will be shocked at how far you come. Okay, so as we finish up today, reverse Q&A. What is something that you took away from today? What is something you learned about in today's workshop? What is an aha for you? What is something that you didn't know before you walked in? There were 24 of you on here, and I can't even turn off your video. Sorry, thanks. What did you learn from today's workshop? And then we drop that in the chat if you don't mind, just to hear what you got out of today. And then if you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But my first question is, what did you get from today's workshop? Being so deliberate on accountability in order to succeed. Yes, people want accountability. They don't want micromanagement. Great reflection, Leonard. Wonderful. So if you have any, I'd love to know what you got out of today. If you put it in the chat. If you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. I will drop the link to the strategy and leadership community in the chat. Oh, excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed the book, Judy. That's very cool. Yes, I don't talk about it very often, but I wrote a book called Alignment, Getting Your People, Strategy, and Culture on the Same Page. And it walks through 2 different folks leading strategic planning and try to do it very practically. And that's really just how we view everything here is it has to be practical, it has to be specific, it has to be easy to implement. Otherwise, it doesn't help you. And then we also have our strategy community, which I've dropped the link for, so that you can talk to other folks, and our moderators are available to be there. We are going to be moving this to a paid service in the next little while. So really and I'd love to hear from you. Like, what would you want out of this? How can we support you as managers and leaders talking to folks? So really welcome any feedback of saying, here's what I would pay for, because we don't want to build stuff that you don't want to buy. But hey, if it would be helpful to have a monthly call with us or other folks, that's something that we're looking at. If having, some other tools or what have you, but like, what would you want that would support your leadership, either from a programmatic or tactical piece? That would be great. So yeah, visit us, smestrategy.net, join our next webinar. And I'm just going to pull this up again just so you have it. And then, yeah, take advantage until April 21st. So April 21st is Sunday by midnight, and you'll get access to all of those tools. Okay, takeaways. If you don't communicate effectively on your strategy, people will assume that nothing is happening. Oh man, how true is that? It's But the converse of it, and it's why we start every strategy session with a celebration, is when you celebrate the strategy, people get more excited. So it's either momentum working against you or momentum working with you. And it's a very valuable tool. Uh, exchanging or understanding change management and putting a formal process behind it. It's neat when you realize you don't have to like recreate everything, but just try to like fill in the blanks or paint by numbers. Wonderful. And being clear on focus of outcomes of the annual plans. Yeah, if you can't measure success with this, you don't have a good plan. Aaron asked, how do you lead up with these concepts? So the way we designed the workshop is just to invite a conversation. And so we ask priming questions. It's like, great, let's have a conversation about our roles and responsibilities. So just like, hey, I would like to have a conversation. So you're not trying to fix anybody. You're not trying to change anybody. You're just trying to have a conversation to move it from implied to explicit. And I find that most people welcome that without trying to be solved. And so all of the workshops that we have is around supporting people with that. Yeah, absolutely. Lucy, I would encourage you, if you take advantage of this offer, you'll get access to our alignment strategy course, which is $500. If you get access to the implementation course, so $700 for both project management training. If you're new, it really is designed for a pack to support you and really get you up to speed. You'll have to listen to my voice a lot. The trade-offs, I think, are worth it. So awesome. All right, everybody. I'm happy to answer any other questions. As I mentioned, check out our course at courses.smestrategy.net. You'll get a follow-up email with everything in there. If you're looking for somebody to facilitate your strategic planning process, please feel free to reach out. And then I'll actually just show you what it looks like when we go to the website, just so you know what to look for. So if you go to courses.smestrategy.net, you will land on this page, and then you can see our aligned strategy course, and then our successful strategic plan implementation course. The landing page is in beta, but it gives you an idea of, his short video modules, practical implementation steps, materials for your team to work together. So you don't need to like force anybody to change. Some the real key stuff that we talked about with our critical capacities, the bonus materials, effective meetings training, access to our community project management 101. This one is awesome. We're going to offer this as a separate course because it's just practical on how to move strategy forward. And I'm a trained project manager, so it's best practice. And then if you get before you pre-order our strategy alignment course, which is $497 on a regular day, and then the 3 group calls to support you moving forward. So you got about 5 days from today to access that. Regular price will then be $997. Pre-order is $697. If you want to buy it at the full price, please feel free. And there's 100% money back guarantee. So if you don't like it, don't buy it, and or just let me know, and we'll give you the money back. No questions asked. Wonderful. All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Happy to answer any other questions. I invite you to get a copy of this training and review it if you'd like it. It just helps us help more people. I really wanted to make it affordable, accessible to support you, but also not making it too complicated. So I'm really proud of it, to be honest. Really, really proud of what we've built and what we've put together. And I hope it helps your teams, because we've seen really, really great results with the folks that we've worked with, and just really excited for that for you. So appreciate you being on the webinar. Appreciate you sharing. Please feel free to share the webinar. I'll email you the recording, but please feel free to share it with your teams, with your people, even colleagues that share it on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, because we're here for you. And I'm just, again, so grateful for the opportunity to support you with your strategy implementation. I don't take the opportunity or the responsibility lightly. And so just thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of our community. And like I said, happy to answer any other questions if you have them. But with that, I think we'll close to finish today. So stay well, be well, enjoy the rest of your day. And as I like to end on my podcasts, see you next time. Thanks, everybody.